iPhone 14 in 2024. My friends, it has almost been 2 years since this beautiful and amazing phone came out back in 2022, and let me tell you, a lot of things have changed. Back in the day, besides the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, which of course were better than the normal 14, this was one of the best offers in the high-end phone market you could find. And nowadays, well, that's simply not the case. We have a better iPhone, the iPhone 15, that's competing in the same price range and the same line of devices, and we have better competition. We have the Galaxy S24 that offers a lot of things that this phone simply doesn't offer, and this phone just simply doesn't have. So it is very interesting to see with this reduced price, because of course it is not the best anymore, but it is also cheaper. It becomes sort of like a lower high-end phone that maybe for a lot of people, because of that lower price, becomes a very interesting option. And it's interesting to see how different it is from the new alternatives and if it actually makes sense to buy it in 2024. Of course, I would like to start by talking about the exterior design, which, being an Apple product, of course, it looks and feels amazing. In this case, it has, of course, glass on the back, aluminum on the sides, which has become kind of the normal thing to do, the basic or the standard thing to do. iPhone 15 has aluminum on the sides and glass on the back. The S24 has aluminum on the sides and glass on the back. It's the standard high-end phone material set to have on a phone. Plastic is kind of like for the low-end phones, and maybe titanium or stainless steel, or for the top-of-the-line alternatives like the Ultra in the case of the Samsung phones and the Pro Max with the iPhones. But besides that, which, by the way, as someone that has an iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, I'm actually recording with an iPhone 15 Pro, I can tell you it is great to know that the phone is maybe going to be a bit more resistant thanks to the titanium, or that the phone feels a little bit better thanks to that matte glass on the back. But at the same time, this feels pretty much identical, and a lot of people use a case on their phone, so that all of these things that I just said are rendered useless for those people. So in this case, I wouldn't really worry too much unless you're like a design freak or like a super nerd like I am, which cares about the little details like that. Oh, the design is a bit different because the glass is matte instead of glossy. A lot of people don't really care about those things, but if you do, yes, this feels a little bit outdated as opposed to the newer 15 or the S24 because it doesn't have those newer design traits. But I mean, it's still a very modern looking iPhone. It has the newest camera layout design. It has the same size. It has the same flat sides, which we'll talk about later because the new iPhone 15 has slightly curved sides. We'll see if that makes a difference in your experience and when you hold it in your hand. When it comes to the colors, the iPhone 15 comes in white, which is the one that I have here, but it also comes in black, blue, yellow, and red. In my case, personally, I actually wanted to go for the blue model, but I always get tired of colors like bright colors, blue, yellow, red. I always get tired after a couple months, so I decided to go for the basic, more safe option because I knew I wanted to keep it for a long time. That's actually what I did with the iPhone 15, although in the case of the iPhone 15, there was not much of a choice. All the colors were pretty much white, and that's also what I did with the S24. As you can see, I'm not a big fan of flashy colors because as I said, I tend to get tired of them, and when you're spending a lot of money on a phone, you don't want to get tired of your phone you spend so much money on. When it comes to the size, the phone is 6.1 inches, which for most people is the standard phone size. Back in the day, this would have been insane to say. Back in 2014, 2015, the biggest phone Apple made was 5.5 inches, which was insane because in 2013, with the iPhone 5S, it was 4 inches. Their biggest phone was 4 inches tall, and now 6.1 inches is not even that big. But in my personal opinion, unless you're a big phone lover, this is more than enough. I mean, it's starting to get to a point where the smaller phone, which in this case is the 6.1 inch version, is a little bit hard to use with only one hand unless you're a big person with bigger hands. In my case, I'm between 5'11 and 6 foot. I'm a man, so I have relatively big hands, and even then, just reaching the right corner of the phone is a little uncomfortable sometimes. So, something to take into account. It is not small, even though it is the smaller phone. And when it comes to comfort in the hand, as I said, there are some very interesting changes that happened with the iPhone 15 people were asking about, even though in my opinion are not that big of a deal. So People were complaining about the iPhone 14s, 13s, and 12s having way too sharp edges that were maybe a bit uncomfortable when you had the phone in your hand. And in my case, personally, I don't really notice. I don't really care. The phone feels incredible in my hand. I actually love the flat sides because, in my opinion, it makes for a better grip. It makes for a more grippy phone that you can hold on to better than if it had like curved sides that feel like they're going to slip out of your hand. But I guess everybody has a different taste. And in this case, Apple didn't want it to go super extreme, super radical with the change. So what they did was they flattened the corners of the bezel a little bit to make it more rounded, but at the same time keeping that sort of flat side aesthetic. And sure, it feels a bit more comfortable. The iPhone 15 feels more easy in the hand. It doesn't sort of like pierce into your skin as much because it doesn't have those sharp corners. But at the same time, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. It's a bit more comfortable to hold, but only if you're self-conscious about it. If you're thinking about it, if you have both phones in your hands and you're trying to compare them, sure, you do notice the difference. But if you're not familiar with the iPhone 15 and you hold your iPhone 14 and you don't think about it, it's not something that's going to be annoying to you. You're not going to, in the middle of texting someone, be like, oh my God, this is piercing my skin and it's uncomfortable. No. So I wouldn't worry about this if you're trying to decide between the 14 and the 15. You should not mind. Another big, very important component on this phone is the processor. In this case, we have the A15 Bionic, which is now 2 generations old. We've had an A16 Bionic, which is the one on the iPhone 15s and 14 Pros, and we also have an A17 Pro, which is the one on the 15 Pro, which I cannot show you because it's the phone recording this video right now. So it is not the newest, best processor available in the market, but at the same time, I have to say, it doesn't feel like a 2-generation old phone. Back in the day, if you had an iPhone 4 and the iPhone 5 was out, you could notice, you could tell it was an old phone. It was kind of outdated, but nowadays, 2 generations, you cannot even notice the difference. Like, this phone is as fast as it gets. It feels super smooth, super, butter. Anything you want to do on the phone, it just opens up instantaneously. There's no waiting times for anything to load up, or it just, everything works amazing. And I'm someone that tries and tests a lot of iPhones and Apple products, and I've been doing it for a while. So I can tell you, with how things are looking right now, if you buy this phone in 2024, you are going to have a great phone experience for the next 3 to 4 years. And then you're going to have a, mid to low end phone experience for another 3 years. So if you're thinking of, maybe I should not buy the iPhone 14 because it's a little bit cheaper, but then it's going to get outdated, so maybe I should spend more money on the iPhone 15. Well, as someone that has had and tried both phones in my daily life, I can tell you they both feel the same. They both have iOS 17.5.1, and they both feel identical. If you covered the notch so I couldn't see which one is which, and you told me, find the differences in speed between the two, I would not be able to notice. The improvements year over year are very small, so even though it's 2 generations old, it is still going to perform incredible for a long time. When it comes to gaming, I wanted to put it to the test in 2 categories. The first one, as you can see, is casual games like Subway Surfers or any other phone game you usually play when you're on the subway or doing some funny Subway Surfers. I'm sorry. You have a couple minutes of spare time, you play a casual games. For these things, this phone, of course, it is amazing. It opens every game instantaneously, and they all work at the maximum frame rate with maximum visual fidelity. And I've never had a bug or any glitch or anything with any of those games. I mean, some of these games like Subway Surfers are 10 years old. So if they ran on an iPhone 5, of course they're going to run amazing on an iPhone 15 or 14. So yeah, like if you're a casual gamer and you play these games, of course, forever you're going to have an amazing experience. Maybe not forever, but for the next 10 years of your life. Unless the phone is just completely broken and it's been 10 years or something, you're going to have a great experience with casual phone games. But what about more complex games like Call of Duty or Genshin Impact, which are games that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with a phone? The 3D games are a lot more complex. They have higher end graphics, and yeah, in some instances, you are not able to max the games out. You cannot play at ultra settings with the maximum frame rates, which is the case, for example, with Genshin Impact. Well, in this case, even though it is not the best of the best, because as I said, with a 2-generation-old chip, we are not going to have the best of the best experience, it is very close. I mean, for example, with the iPhone 14, I can play Genshin Impact at high settings, 60 FPS. And with an iPhone 15 Pro, I can play high settings at 120 FPS. So the difference is there, but it's not really that big of a deal. And as we will see later, the iPhone 14 cannot play at 120 FPS anyways. So you're not even going to notice the difference, even if it could play at those frame rates. As I said earlier, I'm running the latest version of the operating system, in this case iOS 17.5.1 to be more specific, and it is running amazing. I've actually not noticed any differences between iOS 17 and iOS 16 because when I got this phone, it had iOS 16 back in the day, which was the original native operating system for the iPhone 14. And people are usually scared about this. Like they think, oh, if I update my phone to the latest version of the OS, it's going to become slower, it's going to become choppy, it's going to have issues. And that's not the case. I mean, from experience, from my very long iPhone using experience, those issues usually appear in the last year of software updates. Meaning, if the phone is going to update until iOS 17 and you update it to iOS 17, like for example the iPhone XS at this moment, that's when those issues appear. If you update it to the last supported version of the operating system. But if you update it from 16 to 17, being 16 its first operating system version, you're not even going to notice the difference. I mean, I've had both, and as I said, I don't want to be repetitive, but I did not notice a difference. And when iOS 18 comes out, don't worry, it's going to update great. When iOS 19 comes out, it's going to update great. When iOS 20 comes out, it's going to update great. Maybe then, with iOS 20 to 21, that's when you should probably start thinking about, oh, maybe I should keep it on iOS 19 because it's going to be a little sluggish on iOS 20. But yeah, like right now and for the next 2-3 years, you're going to have an amazing experience, and you're not going to notice a difference in speed and fluidity when updating to the latest version of iOS. And I actually do recommend doing it because especially with the latest updates and with some of those, controversial regulations from the EU, Apple has been opening iOS up like I never thought they would. I mean, with the latest update, now we can play Nintendo games with, what was that? That little thing right there, what was that? I'm confused. Anyways, we can play Nintendo games from the Nintendo 64, the GameCube. We can play PlayStation games on emulators officially. We don't have to jailbreak the phone or do anything weird. Oh, I think I know what that was. I think it was Shazam. So I have the double tap feature on the back of the phone, so I accidentally tap it and it starts Shazamming for a song. That happens to me all the time. I'm sorry. Yeah, we can play on emulators officially now on the iPhone, on any iPhone on iOS 17. So yeah, Apple has been doing a lot of great things for consumers lately, whether it is because they wanted to do it or because the EU forced them to do it. For those wondering if iOS is a great option, I think it is. And for those wondering if they should update to the latest version or the iPhone 14 is maybe not a good candidate to update to the latest version, it is too. Quickly, I also wanted to touch on the battery life. Of course, this is not a complex technical video where I'm going to compare it against the other alternatives in a battery life test. This is a experience-based video, so what I'm going to tell you is my experience with the battery life of the phone. And what I can tell you is that it has been incredible, amazing. Of course, it's never going to be as good as the one on a bigger phone like the iPhone 14 Plus or the iPhone 14 Pro Max or the iPhone 15 Plus, 15 Pro Max, or the Galaxy S24 Ultra, which I don't have here at the moment. But for a 6.1 inch form factor, like the one on these three phones, it is very similar in these three. I mean, sure, the iPhone 15 is, I think it's a little bit better. The S24 is a bit better than the iPhone 14 because every year they manage to maybe squeeze in a little bit more battery. They manage to optimize things a little bit better, so they always end up giving it a bit more battery life. But there's so much you can do on a 6.1 inch phone. I mean, there's physical limitations. There's so much battery you can fit into this particular space. If you're worried about this phone having a dramatically different battery than any other phone in the same display size range, don't be, because as I said, like there's physical limitations, literally. So even though sometimes they're a little bit better, sometimes they're a little bit worse, those differences are never as dramatical as the differences we see from the small phone to the big phone. If you want a very good battery life and that's all you care about, then yeah, I would not recommend the normal 14. I would recommend the 14 Plus or any other plus size phone. Probably one of the least interesting things about the iPhone 14 has to be its display, and for a bunch of reasons. It mainly doesn't have the dynamic island, which is something a lot of people are super excited about, something that gets a lot of people's attention. I believe it's mainly because it looks cooler and it looks newer and more fresh, but as someone that has the dynamic island on a lot of phones, including my personal phone, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. It is going to be more optimal for space because it includes notifications and pop-ups inside of the dynamic island, so they don't take up as much space as they would on a notched iPhone. But it doesn't really add any new functionalities we didn't have before. So if you're wondering if you should buy the 15 just because of that, don't do that. If the iPhone 14 is fine for you in every way besides not having a dynamic island, get the 14. And when it comes to the display specs, it is great. It is a great display. It is very, very well calibrated. It has a decent 6.1 inch size. We discussed it earlier. I think it's more than enough for most people. I guess the only issue that's pressing nowadays that I would actually be concerned about if I had to buy this phone is that it doesn't have 120 FPS. This is something a lot of people don't even notice. But for the geeks and techies like me, that we do notice that difference between 120 FPS and 30 FPS or 60. I don't think any phone has 30 FPS. I mean, it's not as smooth. It's a very smooth feeling phone because everything works and it's very stable. And what Apple has done with its refresh technology is amazing, so it feels very smooth, but visually it is not as smooth as a 120 FPS display. And if you do notice, well, there's that. You're not gonna have that smooth buttery text, buttery everything experience that you get with a high refresh rate phone, which I can tell you from experience because, as I said, my phone, the 15 Pro, has 120 FPS. And finally, we can talk a little bit about the cameras. I think nowadays this is becoming one of the biggest deciding factors for people. How good are the cameras on this phone? Because nowadays, in a lot of ways, phones are, as I said earlier, like processors are not evolving as much as they did before. Displays are not evolving as much as they did before. So the only thing that is actually keeping up a good pace in terms of evolution is the camera quality, the camera size, the camera performance, the camera versatility. In this case, we have, well, it is not the perfect set. It is a normal phone. And it's very limited, in my opinion, because it only has 2 cameras. This, I would say, is the biggest complaint I have with the normal iPhone lineup, because the Pro phones have 3 cameras, and I think every other Android phone in the same price range has 3 cameras. In this case, we have an ultra-wide camera with 12 megapixels, and we have a main camera with also 12 megapixels. I have to say, photos taken with these cameras are incredible. Like, when it comes to the actual photo quality of the cameras using these 12 megapixel sensors are amazing. The level of detail you can get with only 12 megapixels on these phones is insane. It is incredible. The dynamic range, the bokeh, the reliability of it when it comes to like getting everything right, getting everything in focus, getting everything properly exposed, it's a great camera. But I can't help it but to feel like if they had included, like they did on the iPhone 15, a high resolution main sensor, so you can do an optical crop on the sensor and have a 2x mode, or just like every other phone company does, included another camera, in this case a 3x telephoto camera, the phone would be a lot more versatile. Because one of the biggest complaints I have with this phone is not being able to zoom in optically. A lot of times you want to take a group photo or you want to take a selfie and it's fine. These cameras are fine. You want to take a general photo of a place or a building or something, it's fine. But what about those times you want to take a photo of something that's far away, or you want to take a close-up of someone's face because it looks more professional? You maybe want to take a photo you want to frame later. You cannot do that with the iPhone 14 unless you physically move the phone, which Sure, it's doable if you want to take a close-up of something, just physically get closer, but it sometimes gets a little annoying to have to like move the camera, the phone, instead of moving or just automatically getting it closer. And the perspective and the proportions of everything change when you have a zoom camera as opposed to a wider angle lens. So yeah, I think a great conclusion for the iPhone 14 in 2024 would be that for this type of phone in this price range, we have an ocean of options, and these are only three. Like, we have the old S23, we have phones from Xiaomi, we have phones from Oppo, we have other phones from Apple, we have a lot of stores selling a lot of phones, and I guess it can become a little bit complicated to make a decision. I could see that because in this price range, you have phones for $20 more, $40 more, $30 less, $60 less. Like, there's so many options. And of course, I cannot tell you this is the ultimate choice. You could buy an iPhone 13, it could be a good choice. You could buy an iPhone 15, it could be a good choice. But what I could tell you is that if you're looking for a phone and this is your budget, the price of this phone is your budget, and you buy the iPhone 14, you're not going to be disappointed. You're going to buy it. You're going to love it. It's very likely going to be dramatically better than your old phone, and you're never going to look back. You're going to enjoy it, and you're going to have a nice experience with it, mostly, okay? The only thing that I would, maybe I guess you would miss with this phone is, as I said, the fact that it doesn't have a zoom camera. That's the only reason. If you're going to use a zoom camera, you see yourself wanting to use a zoom camera, maybe then go for a phone with some kind of zoom capability beyond just zooming in on the picture and losing quality. Because, that's the only thing that's a little bit iffy about the iPhone 14. Everything else, it is an amazing phone for the price, and you're never going to be disappointed if you end up choosing the iPhone 14. For those interested, there's a discount link for Amazon down below in the description, just in case at the end of the video you want to buy it or take a look.